So last week on the program, we talked about Tom Perez and the DNC's purge of progressives from the DNC. So basically anyone that was a supporter of Bernie Sanders or endorsed Keith Ellison over Tom Perez during the DNC race in early 2017, well, they were purged from the DNC, and those positions were filled with loyalists to the Democratic Party establishment and Tom Perez. Now, to only talk about the purge of progressives does a service to the DNC because they are doing more to put up barriers that block progressives from actually attaining any sort of power, not just in the DNC, but electorally as well. So, Justice Democrats co-founder Cenk Uygur explains the situation and how the DNC is now up to the same tricks that we saw during Debbie Wasserman Schultz's tenure.
There's something very important called VAN, the Voter Access Network. Let me explain what that is. And the Justice Democrats put out a press release about this, and I'm going to quote it. Voter Access Network is a tool used by Democratic candidates to target voter outreach efforts. Generally, campaigns are given access to voter data that has been gathered by previous campaigns at both a national and local level. So that's the way that it is supposed to work. So you've got two Democratic candidates, or 3 or 4 or 5, they're supposed to have the same access to this incredibly important tool for reaching out to voters. Well, that is not how it's working for 3 of the Justice Democratic candidates who are challenging incumbents. So JD candidate Anthony Clark is going up against Danny Davis, and he has been blocked. I'm going to give you the details of how they were blocked in a second. ALEXANDRIA Ocasio-Cortez with a really powerful challenge of Joe Crowley in New York. Joe Crowley is one of the leadership guys in the Democratic Party, so they really, really want to protect him. And Sarah Smith is going up against Adam Smith in Washington, a Democratic representative that is weirdly conservative in the state of Washington. I don't know why you guys put up with that. So let me go one by one through these different issues. So Anthony Clark is running against the incumbent Danny Davis. In his case, well, that one was really simple. They just blocked access to him. They said, we're not going to give you that information at all. So Anthony Clark now stands a far less chance of winning, thanks to the shenanigans of the DNC as usual. Now, for the others, they had to do some level of nuance. So for ALEXANDRIA Ocasio-Cortez, they said, oh, sure, we'll give you the voter data. But they removed key voter data from past campaigns and gave her a watered down version. It's not like these guys are going to be caught unawares. Like, would they think that we're new to this thing? The Just Democrats are stacked with people who worked on Bernie Sanders' campaign. They took Bernie Sanders from almost nothing in the polls, 2-3%, up to 46%. I think they know what they're doing. So when they get the voter data and it's old voter data that is not nearly as useful, that is not a trick that is going to slide past them. And the way that they treat progressives as if we're children and don't know how politics works is maddening. By the way, if you want to fight back, justicedemocrats.com/win to finance these guys and to help them and support them, because they do not take corporate money and they do not take PAC money. So that is part of what drives the Democratic establishment crazy about these candidates. They're actual progressives that are uncorrupted. So that leads us to Sarah Smith, which unfortunately is the funniest story. I mean, it's not funny at all because she's an actual progressive who fights super hard to get your priorities. But it's funny in how they denied her. They said, well, sure, you could get access to that important information, but first you need to get approval. You need 2 county party approvals. You need approval from 10 legislative district parties. This is all the establishment, right? There's some great folks in there, but some folks who are not going to want to see the incumbent lose. And then my favorite part, you need to be endorsed by half of the Democratic Party before you can get access. So 51% of the Democratic Party has to, in the state of Washington, has to agree to give her the voter data. That's like winning the election. Like, okay, no problem. You can get access to the voter data to help you win the election right after you win the election. Okay, now it's not the same exact thing because it's Democratic Party officials, but it is a preposterous standard.
Now, let me remind you that Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she did this in 2015 to Bernie Sanders. She did this in 2016 to Tim Canova, her opponent, and she also did this to Alex Law, who was running against Donald Norcross in New Jersey. So this is a tactic that the DNC has used time and again to stifle the campaigns of progressives. It makes it effectively impossible to run a successful campaign if you don't have access to NGP van. It's crucial. Now, to be clear, I don't necessarily know that this was a decision that Tom Perez made himself unilaterally, or if he was even associated in the decision-making process when it comes to restricting these progressives' access to van, because it does seem as though in some cases, state parties took it upon themselves to block their access to NGP van. However, since Tom Perez is the chairman of the National Party, I think reaching out to him is important because the buck stops with him. I mean, he is the individual who can tell these parties to reverse their decision. So I would encourage you all to sign the Justice Democrats petition. And look, understand that this is frustrating because all we're asking is to try to win fair and square. We're not asking to take over the party arbitrarily. We are asking to have a fair chance, just like anyone else, to win and affect change. But we're not being offered that from the so-called Democratic Party. So they are the undemocratic party. So this makes me so angry. They don't want progressives to get a foothold into power because that threatens the bottom line. That threatens the corporate donations that they're receiving.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.